Welcome, everybody, to the city planning meeting night. We actually have a public hearing that we are going to take care of first, and that is also an action item later on in the city planning commission meeting. So we'll do the public hearing at this time, and then we'll do the action item later on under the regular planning commission meeting. So I do call this public hearing to order. In attendance, we have Commissioners Keelan, Olson, Barrett, who's this new guy here? Pat Fair. You only missed 2 meetings, right? I'm picking on you.
I think so. I have no idea.
You're right.
They're excused, though.
All right. Well, everybody's here. All right. And also we have our city administrator, who also is going to be a part of the city planning commission as his new role. And then we have Andrew Dane as our staffer that's staffing up the planning commission tonight. So as far as the purpose of the hearing, Andrew, do you want to just briefly tell us exactly what this is about?
Sure. So this is for a special use permit for Waupaca Development LLC, 1030 West Fulton Street, which is the Dunkin' Donuts project.
Andrew, you need to pull your
Oh,
mic.
I'm sorry. Which is the Dunkin' Donuts project proposed for 1030 West Fulton Street. So the owners, one of the developers is here for the project and can talk to specifics, but the proposal is to build a new store at this location, potentially with a goal, kind of a start date goal of spring 2020. And as part of your zoning code process, you have special use, you require special use for all restaurants within the city. So they're going through their due diligence here and looking to get the special use permit approved. And we're also going to be taking a look at the site plan as well.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. So like all public hearings, it's just for people to say whether they're in favor of the special use permit or against it. It's not to have questions answered or to ask questions for that matter. That will happen during the regular meeting. So at this time, if there's anybody that would like to give testimony in favor of the special use permit, please step up to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and limit your time to 3 minutes or less.
Tony Hoos with ADI Development Company. We have a contract put together with Dunkin' Donuts. We've been working with them for approximately a year and a half to put the deal together. So it finally got it to where we're at tonight. So we're very hopeful that you feel as positive as we do about bringing these folks to the community, and they're real excited to be here. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Any other testimony in favor of the special use permit? Then at this time, we'll take testimony in opposition. Is there any testimony in opposition to this special use permit? Hearing none, I declare this hearing closed at 5:23 p.m. All right, then let's go right to the City Planning Commission meeting. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2019, and it is 5:24 p.m. I call this meeting to order. In attendance, we do have, and I'll say it again for the tape recorder, it's Keelan, Olson, Barrett, Kinnear, Fair, Barron's, Mayor Brian Smith, City Administrator Aaron Johnson, and then also our staffer, Andrew Dane. And we'd be looking at an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Fair, second by Keelan, that we approve the agenda as printed. Any discussion? I guess I do want to make sure that you all know that Justin was nice enough to, one of the non-action items tonight is to talk about the fence ordinance, and he did put that on your desk, so that will be used to discuss that at a later time. Okay, ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. You have minutes from last meeting, the August 7th meeting. Those are in your packet. Unless you see that any changes need to be made, we just need a motion to approve to place these on file.
So moved.
Motion by Barron, second by Olson, that we approve of August 7th, 2019 meeting minutes and place them on file. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Okay, so we have two action items. They have to do with the same property, actually in the same LLC. We have a special use permit and a site plan review. And Andrew, you want to just lead us through that, please?
Yeah, why don't I lead us through the special use permit, and then Justin and I can kind of tag team the site plan review as needed. He's been working on that one a little bit more closely than I have. But we did put together a couple memos or reports regarding both of the special use permit as well as the site plan review. So, there is a process that we follow for these special use permits or evaluation criteria. We reviewed the proposal and against the requirements of the B4 zoning district, strip commercial district that is in place for this area, and kind of went through our standards of approval as shown on the report here. We felt from a staff perspective that the project met all the standards that were in place, and we didn't see that this presented any challenges to endanger public health safety. We felt that it was compatible with the intent of that district and the surrounding uses and neighborhood. We felt that it would support orderly development within the district, that there was adequate utilities, access roads, and drainage within at the site. So we had made a suggestion. Our recommendation was that Plan Commission approve the special use permit with some caveats, subject to some conditions, as indicated here on the second page of the report. The applicant shall comply obviously with all state and local building codes, fire codes. They'll need to obviously get inspection from Waupaca County Health Department regarding food service. They're also going to need to go through the sign permit process to pull a sign permit prior to construction or installation of signs, and that we've also asked that the applicant submit a cross-access agreement for shared parking, which has been done and has been recorded as well, notarized and recorded. So with that, again, our recommendation, staff recommendation, was for approval of the special use permit submitted by Tony Hose.
Tony, can you just step up to the podium? It will make it easier for us, and understand that we are on radio and also on our public access TV tonight too, so that's why we want you to use the microphone. So the five things that they have listed, staff has listed as part of the suggested motion, you've read those and you are okay with all of those?
Absolutely, not an issue.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about the special use permit?
No, you're going to get into the site plan a little bit?
That's the next
I
action.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, this is just the special use permit part of it. And
Okay.
Andrew, remind me again,
Yeah.
this is approved by city planning or it's recommended to council? I keep forgetting.
We seem to have this conversation every month. You guys should know this better than I.
Oh, I think
Do
it
we
has to
have
be
the
recommended, so.
recommended to council
Yeah.
for their final approval? That
Yeah.
probably makes sense.
Don't you think so? Alan?
I think the special use permit does not require that, but I think the site review does.
Okay,
That's what I think too.
okay. All right,
Site plan review is, yeah, plan commission.
yeah, we
Special
approved
use
that.
permit, it's
Yeah,
recommended.
that's,
Council.
yeah.
So if a motion is made, it's to recommend to council. Is that what-
This one is,
This one
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion then that we accept the special use permit as pointed out by staff, with the conditions as pointed out by staff.
Now, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ferris, second by Keelan, that Planning Commission recommend to council the special use permit with those 5 items that are listed on there. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Let's somebody write this down so we have it in front of us.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about it in the future. Okay, thanks.
Note to
Sandy.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's go to site plan review then. It's up to you, yeah. You can actually sit next to Andrew too if you want, and then you don't.
Hey, we got a little microphone there.
Yeah.
Kind of nice.
So your name is Peg tonight, so
Yeah,
behave
well, now,
yourself.
called worse.
Tom. So, again, with the site plan review, we had, per our process here at the city, the site plan was reviewed for planning purposes at the staff level, and then as far as the engineering aspects, public work aspects, through the contract with Strand and Associates, they had their engineers review this for items such as stormwater and some of the architecture, engineering aspects of this, turning radiuses, et cetera, ingress, egress. There were some items that were, so that report, that memo or staff, that analysis by Strand was received here by the city, and then that information was shared back with Tony, and then they were able to address some of the items that Strand had identified. But again, from my perspective, from the planning side, didn't see any, major red flags. Probably, I think, Justin, you kind of got a little bit more further into the weeds on this from the engineering standpoint. If you wanted to comment, I don't know if you had any comments you wanted to make. But in terms of our site plan review, I thought it looked fine. Probably the only challenge here, I think, was really the parking, but I think with the cross-access agreements, that's addressed. So I don't have a concern with that.
Speaking of parking, as I looked at the the diagrams, is the drive in and out going to remain the same in terms of what's already existing, in terms of driveways? No.
No, it'll be reduced. You're speaking of the driveway entrance off of Fulton?
Yes.
It'll be reduced in size. The width will be reduced. That'll give us a few extra stalls, parking stalls.
Okay.
So let's talk about that still a little bit more. So the only access to this is off of Fulton Street, or is there still access off of
Covered.
Covered bridge.
Covered Bridge?
Yes,
So
both.
Both, still.
Both. There's a cross-access and parking agreement in place.
Okay, so, and they're going to be able to enter and exit through both of those.
Correct.
So they're wide enough to handle that.
Absolutely.
And then on Fulton Street, when they're exiting, are they allowed to turn east? Can they turn east there?
Yeah, I think there's a left turn lane.
Off of Covered Bridge
Off of-
there is.
No,
but
off of Fulton.
Is there,
I'm
there's
pretty-
that little section in the middle there, and I don't know if they can,
That's clear right there in front of the driveway.
so they will be able to turn east there.
Yes.
Okay, just want to know for sure. And by no means do I want to curtail any of this, but I think that's an area that we really have to watch very closely. You know, if you're, I mean, I was just at Hanson's today, not to name drop, but, you know, and to turn east to get back into town, you know, those cars coming west on Fulton Street are moving pretty fast, and you have to be really careful.
If I may, and I agree with you, but I think what planning did really well was that I think that median strip is extremely wide. We don't see that in a lot of different communities that we work with, so I have to commend the people that were involved with that, because you're right, that's a busy thoroughfare with 4 lanes, so,
Yeah.
but that definitely makes it a bit safer without a doubt, so.
Sure,
I think it's the equivalent of going into Aldi's or coming out of Aldi's, for example.
right, yeah. I agree, and that's kind of scary too. To tell you the truth. I'm just saying, you have to be really careful.
So are you saying that, and just as we're looking at the diagram or the picture on the screen, are both driveways are going to be narrowed?
No.
No.
Okay. Can I speak on it, please?
Yeah.
Okay. So the area that the mayor had questioned out on Fulton Street is there's not a full median there. So you'll be able to cross that eastbound turn movement or going out of Duncan and going eastbound is available. The driveway, which is not seen on this diagram off of Covered Bridge Road, is still there. That's unaltered. This one out front on Fulton will be altered. It'll be changed quite significantly. The old, it's an old gas station there.
Right.
Was right here. You know, if you can see my marker moving, that's as wide as it used to be. He's going to make this down here. So looking at it from plan review between myself and Strand, considered this to be an improvement to the traffic flow going both in and out. So it's more controlled situation. So it should improve the safety. As far as the number of cars coming and going, we didn't see an issue with that or have any safety concerns with that as well. If we wanted to, we could have contacted the DOT to get their opinion. We didn't feel that was necessary on this one due to the improvements we see with this plan and the restriction, I guess, to the driveway being narrowed down, which should help the control of movement in and out.
Justin, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a site map that shows it pretty clear, the parking lot layout. I'm not showing numbers on my pages in my packet, but
This
if
one
you
here?
keep going on, even more. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, there you
Right
go.
there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this driveway over here at Cover Bridge, I assumed it was going to stay the same.
Correct.
Okay.
You bet.
And then the cross, if I'm correct in speaking, the cross access and cross parking, basically there's a property line that comes right down the middle where the stairwell is, and it's 2 different corporations, one the same owner, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
But all of those parking stalls and parking spaces are all going to be striped?
Yes, absolutely. So I believe there are 11 that are on lot number 2, which is the Dunkin' Donut site. And then we, as Justin and Andrew alluded to, we put together, in addition to the cross-access easement, we put together a cross-parking easement. So they'll be able to share that lower lot to the east of where the Dunkin' building is. That's actually located on lot 1.
Andrew, were there any mitigating circumstances to this project because the previous business there was a gas station?
Not that I was aware of. I think, didn't you have I think you've got a closure letter that, exempt, indicating that the site is clean from the
Yeah,
DNR.
they actually came in the middle of the night and dug the tanks out and left.
Yeah.
Talk to Falk Brothers. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, okay.
I'd like to make one more note here. So the stairwell is here that has that giant retaining wall there. I shouldn't say giant, but there's a significant retaining wall separating the front half to the back half of the property. We have recommended that this yellow striping here be remarked with the Duncan development, just to
Yes.
bring awareness that this is a pedestrian area. There may be people coming up and down, not a parking stall. So that was highly recommended. We didn't require it, but that's what we'd like to see with this.
Absolutely.
One more safety improvement we saw with this whole plan.
There's a picture of that too, actually, Justin, in the packet too. Pretty good picture of that.
Right up in this area.
Yeah.
Is that parking area going to be repaved as well, or
It will be. On the Duncan
on the
site.
Duncan site? Yeah, yeah.
They'll likely do a saw cut on the lot line. I believe that pavement right now goes a little bit over into Lot 2, which is a Duncan site. But yes, I think they'll saw cut it and then match up the grade there.
Anything else that you have as far as the site plan? Justin?
Just the site plan they submitted, the preliminary one was well done. So we came up with some comments, but it was mostly that, just a comment back and forth. We made some improvements. All in all, a very well handled project. It's been a pleasure to work with Tony and his engineering firm on this.
Thank you. Likewise.
I see very little issues with this. He went above and beyond for the stormwater. I think that should be noted. A lot of developers, it's an additional expense. It's an improvement. It's something that should be commended, that what they are planning on doing is putting some underground storage chambers. So basically to catch and hold on to stormwater before it goes out into our storm sewer, which then goes out into nature. So we're getting some treatment benefit from their improvement.
Justin, so I want to go back to the Fulton Street again here just real quick. So the speed limit when you go past that area is 40 miles an hour. If we find that that's too fast because of Domino's is actually moving on to that site also, right? I saw them
Correct.
putting up the sign today, so.
In the old Arby's
Yeah, in the old
spot.
Arby's. So there's going to be additional usage there between the Dunkin' Donut and the Domino's, I'm guessing. So is that something that's required that we have to get from the state permission if we were to slow the drivers down?
To change the speed limit on a state highway, we would need their approval.
Okay.
So we would have to basically reach out to them, probably petition to reduce the speed to make that happen.
Okay. Well, and I'm not suggesting that we do it, but I just, again, these people are going to be pulling into Dunkin' Donuts to get coffee in the morning and driving out, and they're going to be turning east, and the sun at 7 o'clock in the morning is right in your face. So they have to be really careful, and that's the only thing I'm concerned about. Although the traffic going westbound is not as bad in the morning, so I'm sure it will be fine. I'm just a little bit nervous about it, that's all.
I was going to maybe bring up the same thing. I think it's worth just noting for the record, and also that we may want to just monitor that. Maybe we could reach out to the DOT, get the current statistics, crash statistics, and then just go make a note to follow up and 6 months after this opens or something, to monitor that. 40 miles an hour does seem a little excessive for kind of a neighborhood commercial district, in my opinion. So it might be worth looking at.
Yeah, I can follow up with that.
Alan?
Actually, I think it transitions from 45 to 40 right in that area. But just going eastbound, it is 45 miles an hour from the stoplight on up to, in that vicinity.
Yeah.
So they're probably still doing 45 at the time.
Well, actually, they're doing 52.
That's right. I would anyway.
Yeah.
But they're about to slam on their brakes, right? Because there's lights out there too, so.
Well, we wouldn't be opposed, I mean, at some point down the line, obviously, from a safety standpoint, if a situation presents itself that is a hazard of some sort, I can't imagine that this project would be the impetus for that, but if there's an issue that comes up, we wouldn't be opposed to a reduced speed limit whatsoever. In fact, that would be welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Anything else on the site plan review, Andrew?
No, I don't think so. Again, as I mentioned before, they'll be coming back for the sign permit, so we'll get a chance to take another look at that. But I think everything else has kind of been addressed. We've kind of hit at a high level.
Okay, sounds good. So site plan reviews are approved by the City Plan Commission, so if you're okay with it, then we would just make a motion to approve the site plan review.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Barrett, that we approve the site plan review for the Dunkin' Donuts property at 1030 West Fulton Street. Any further discussion?
Just a question, Pat. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, just as long as Tony had the mic, Andrew alluded to the timing. Do you want to just give us an idea on the timing for this project from your perspective?
Absolutely, you bet. We were just discussing, well, Justin and I and Andrew, we're going to apply for an early start permit, which would consist of us submitting to Jane Drager, the building inspector, a foundation plan. And basically, that would allow us to a little bit of a head start because there's still some engineering that needs to be done on the building from Duncan's standpoint. So while they're finishing that up, we could start on our end. So that's our plan. And then basically, we'd like to get in the ground excavation-wise and site work-wise within, say, 45 days, give or take. And ultimately, the completion date we're shooting for and opening would be spring, this coming spring. So that's the game plan.
A quick question was, with the elevations of the building, can you just run through basically what the materials are? I see a lot about the color, but specifically, are you using anodized aluminum? Are you using?
It's a fiberboard material.
Okay.
This is new to Duncan. It's very it's very durable. It's attractive. We spent quite a bit of time with them, probably a half a year, negotiating on what was going to go on the building and then the height of the building. So that was another topic of discussion. But yeah, and I think they give you some options here as to what it will be. It'll be one, a combination of, I don't believe it's going to be all of these, but these will be.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell from the material board what the material was.
Right.
The colors are great. I think they're wonderful, but if,
You bet.
is it all fiberboard?
Yeah, kind of like a fiber masonry board. I
Yep.
don't know if that's a,
Composite. like
Yeah.
a Cement
Cement.
composite, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Anybody else? Ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. So, Tony, thank you, good luck.
thank you all.
Do you own any other vacant lots, or we do have some other commercial property if you're interested in?
Well, I'd have to run that past my wife first. But we've actually got some vacant lots out of town that I've got in some other cities that we've got to address first. But I appreciate it. Justin mentioned this before, but we've really enjoyed working with everybody. Andrew, the past folks that aren't here anymore. Enjoyed working with them and all of you, so I greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to it. We're really excited about this project. So thank you all.
All right, well, thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tony.
All right, let's go on to reports. We have 4 things under the reports. Andrew, the August 2019 building permits and all of that goes along with that.
Sure. I did do another report. I think it was suggested at the last Plan Commission to continue doing these, and it doesn't take long to put this together. So just kind of a few highlights here. Building permits. Didn't have a ton of activity. A lot of this stuff was remodels and some smaller projects. You see the antenna, that cell tower on Churchill, permit was pulled. That was one of the larger ones. And I believe there's a home on here for $225,000. There's a home permit that was pulled for a single-family home on the Foxfire Court. That was also one of the larger permits that was pulled this past month. But other than that, a lot of remodels, some signage, some interior remodels. And that's about it for the building permits this past month. In terms of code enforcement, I did have an opportunity to talk to Elizabeth Holsworth, who's our code enforcement officer. Had a conversation with her this last month to try to get a little bit more up to speed on some of the status of the code enforcement. And she indicated she thought things were heading in generally in a positive trend direction. Part of that may be due to the fact that we're taking a little bit less proactive approach than in the past under Brennan. I've kind of suggested to staff that, as we don't want to turn a blind eye to minor code violations, but the truth is, if you go out looking for violations, you could find a violation on just about every other parcel in the city. There weren't any real glaring, or standout code enforcement issues, I guess, this past month. A lot of these, as I reviewed them with Elizabeth, were for yards, weeds growing in excess of whatever the rule is, 10 or 12 inches. A few of the zoning issues having to do with fences, I believe, and some signage. So some little items, but not too much was stood out. There's a backlog, and so I would like to work with Elizabeth. I told her I'd like to work with her to just put a action plan in place to clear this backlog. There's a close to a couple dozen outstanding code violations that are over a year old. Some of those items are waiting some clarification from the attorney. Some of them are waiting some clarification or some direction, I think, from Plan Commission. Some of them are waiting clarification or direction from staff, but we just need to get a plan in place to work through that backlog and just clear the books of some of these outstanding code violations that have been lingering out there for a while. As far as the development update goes, I did have a nice follow-up meeting with the owners of the Oz Natural area. So the ongoing discussion of to try to help them prepare and kind of come back to this Plan Commission with a more concrete plan. The direction we gave them previously was that, I think Plan Commission was willing to work with them, but it felt like a bit of a moving target. So we had an opportunity to go out there and kind of, I had an opportunity to go out there and meet with them directly and take a look at their project and had a follow-up call. They said they weren't quite ready to come back, but they would likely come back in October. So we may revisit that at our next Plan Commission meeting if they've got something for us concrete to react to. The other little ones, I guess, follow-ups here, some not so little. Home and Away Ministries, 705 West Fulton Street. We did have, after Plan Commission denied the special use permit, and I believe that was at the July meeting, they were sent a letter kind of recapping that meeting, and we had a follow-up meeting with Executive Director Lynn Sarr from Home and Away Ministries to discuss the situation. Their intent is they still are very much interested in moving forward with this project, but we explained to them kind of our hands are also in a little bit of a bind as far as the zoning code goes, and the use that they're looking for is really not allowed within that B4 district. So I guess our intent, one of our thoughts kind of at the staff level here is to go back and revisit that. If there is a path forward that may allow them to move forward with their project, it would likely have to be revisiting that entire zoning district, that entire B4 commercial district. And I think in light of Shopko and Kmart going out of business, it may make sense now. That district was originally set up in part to support some of that larger format, big box retail, which we know is probably not coming back, at least anytime in the near future. So it might be appropriate, I think, for the city to go back and take a look at that district and that whole corridor, and perhaps look at some potential changes to the comprehensive plan or to the zoning code that would reflect kind of the change in market conditions out there. I don't know that would necessarily result in Home and Away Ministries, moving forward with their project, but I think it might be worth at least for us to take a look at that corridor and perhaps do a little study and come back with some recommendations. But we seem to be a little bit of at an impasse with that particular project because it simply doesn't, that warehouse distribution use just is not allowed within the B4 district. So I think the next step on that is we have to spend a little bit more time at the staff level, decide kind of what direction we want to go, if we want to kind of take a little look at that Fulton Street corridor and kind of open that up. But at this point, we're in a little bit of an impasse, and I think Home and Away Ministries is going to have to kind of work with us and be a little bit patient, because I don't see any quick silver bullet for us to get that project moving forward at this time. Like I said, maybe revisiting your land use plan, your zoning codes for that district is an option, but that'll probably take a few months.
Excuse me, Andrew, so when you met with them yesterday, I assume?
Yeah, it was actually I think I got the date wrong, and I think it was last.
Before Labor Day, it was?
Yeah, I think it was last Tuesday.
Well, when you left that meeting, was there any other date set where you were going to talk with them?
We didn't have, I don't think we had a specific, I don't think we ended with a meeting date in the
No,
calendar.
the way it ended actually is Andrew was gonna do some research on a couple of other centers that he has within the state of Wisconsin to see how they're zoned and how they fit, and you did do that.
I did do that, yeah.
And then I think we're at the point where we're not ready to meet with him again until Planning Commission, council, and staff is on the same page whether they want to re-look at the zoning of those properties on West Fulton Street.
Well, if we, if we are willing to do that, look at it, that's one thing, and certainly I would say that's fine, we can certainly discuss it. But what would they have to do in order to comply with things as is? Is there any way that they're interested in changing their business model to comply?
It didn't sound like it. We sent them the letter and kind of explained to them what their options are and kind of the allowable uses within that district, which there are many. And they didn't, Lynn didn't seem, he was very adamant that, that they were going to build out there and that we would find a solution for them. And, but I think they're very much focused on that warehouse distribution model, and I think that is what they want to proceed with.
Yeah, there isn't anything, Pat, if you remember from the July meeting when we had Attorney Steve Sorensen here, there was just absolutely nothing that they could do under the current zoning to make it work. And
As their operation is.
as their operation is now. And even if they were to do like a retail part in the front, which they're not, and even if they did that, that was a little iffy, if you remember, from Attorney Sorensen at that time too. I think I think, like Andrew said, since we met in July with the Kmart closing, and obviously Shopko closed last year, I mean, it probably does make sense to look at it, and we're not doing it just for him, but we do have 3 big box buildings up in that area that are gonna be open that, if we just, if we expect them to just end up the same use that they were before, I think we're kidding ourselves. That's probably not gonna happen. So I think we really do need to take a good look at that. One of the things that is a concern, obviously, of that property too, even if it was zoned properly, again, talking about traffic, the traffic on Fulton Street there, and especially with Hillcrest Drive being changed, the direction, how it comes out onto Fulton Street, that's a big issue there. And it could be a big issue for the state too. We don't know if it is or not. So they have more, they're not gonna, I think Lynn wanted to get it done that day, right? And so, he might try to put a little pressure on us by continuing the discussion, but I don't see a real short-term solution, as Andrew has said, to it. But we are trying.
Yeah.
I think we can be proactive and take a look at this area, and I think so that may be something we should, I could certainly be prepared to come back with next month and kind of do some kind of staff analysis out there and maybe look at some other communities and some strategies that they've used to try to, you're certainly not the only community that's going through this right now. So look at some of the best practices in terms of facilitating adaptive reuse of these big box stores. And then I think it's worth having a discussion here at Plan Commission in terms of how you want to address that. But I think it's worthwhile to think about, that corridor. I think with Tony's project and the Dunkin' coming in and the Domino's and some of the national chains that you have out there, it's a really strong, healthy, vital, vibrant business corridor. And even with the 2 buildings, even with a couple of the big boxes closing, you still have a lot of economic activity out there. And so I think you want to be somewhat careful as, moving forward. And obviously, warehouse distribution was not included when you originally set that district up. You were not envisioning that corridor as being a hub for, warehouse distribution. We all know now that with, commercial storage and next day delivery and the growth, there is actually quite a bit of interest in warehouse and distribution facilities now. But I think you kind of got to look at sort of the pros and cons of that and decide, I guess, as a community, if that's if in fact that is a use that do you think makes sense out there, and if so, kind of what sort of conditions you'd want to put around it. So I guess I would agree with the mayor. We take kind of a holistic look at it, and I could certainly put something together for that next Plan Commission meeting, and we'll have a follow-up conversation with Lynn and let them know where we're at. I don't know their situation as far as their operations on Churchill. I assume that's what they're continuing business as usual right now. But I know they're chomping at the bit, trying to do something out here. They got a sweetheart deal for that building, and obviously, that we got to be smart about the kind of moving forward too from a legal perspective. I think because, as I mentioned last time, there was a previous owner previous buyer who came forward wanting to purchase that building for a distribution center, and that gentleman was told no by city staff, that wouldn't fit within the zoning code. So that individual is keeping an eye on us, and so we just want to be smart, I think, as we move forward and kind of get our ducks in a row.
Yeah, only one other comment about that in the place on Churchill or 10th Street or whatever it is on. We did ask him too, and he does have a prospective buyer to buy that property on 10th Street too. So we're not going to end up with a vacant building there either if we are able to come to some kind of an agreement. And that obviously was a concern of ours too, so. Yeah.
I guess the last two little quick comments I'll make, continue to have some dialogue with Nino Pedrelli regarding the St. Mary Magdalene Church, redevelopment. I think now with Aaron coming on with the new city administrator, it's a good opportunity I'd like to sit down with the city administrator and probably Justin, the mayor, et cetera, and we'll kind of get Aaron up to speed on this project. And we'll be looking to bring back to the city, proposal here this fall. He did ask for a 2-month extension of that development agreement, so was that approved at council?
It was.
Last night, okay. But that's still in motion, and there's still some interest there and communications, so and we believe so we think that there's a potential project there, and we'll continue to work on that. I should also mention that, I think they're going to, he'll be coming forward and as the developer also looking from some direction from the city and from Plan Commission as well as to, because we've asked them to come forward with a few alternatives. So as we get closer, I'll provide more information. The last one is the Tower Ridge Apartments. We've had some ongoing discussions with S.C. Swiderski, Scott Wessel, their project developer, regarding an amendment to their planned development district out there off of Fulton. And they have submitted the preliminary application to open up that and amend that planned development. So they've prepared a site plan with building footprints and by our next meeting, we'll be able to bring that information forward and get some direction from you guys and to make sure Plan Commission is in support of that project moving forward, and that'll kind of be their opportunity. They're kind of kick at the can, early sort of kick at the can here for Plan Commission to kind of give them the nod on that project. If that is something that is viewed favorably, again, they're looking at moving forward with the project development with a potential construction start date of spring 2020 as well.
All right.
That's all I got.
Andrew, thanks. Any other questions for Andrew or comments about those items? All right. The next item, which is actually our last item on the agenda, has to do with the fence ordinance. And I asked that this be brought to City Planning Commission, and actually I invited Chris Burrington to come tonight too, to just give us his experience as far as applying for a fence ordinance. But I just wanted to set this up real quickly, that there's actually at least two reasons why I asked for this to be on the agenda. Number one, I think there's many people in the public that don't even know that we have a fence ordinance. And obviously ignorance of the law doesn't take care of it, but I think it's important that we try to get the information out as much as we can to them. So obviously by having Angie here tonight, she'll hopefully make sure that people understand that the city does have a fence ordinance, and also getting it on the radio and the TV. Not that I'm telling you what to write or anything, Angie, but, and I think that's important to do. And then the second part of it is, you'll hear, I think through Mr. Burrington's experience, that there is not a consensus among staff how to interpret the fence ordinance. And so we, as a planning commission, I think, need to look at this and see if we can come to a consensus. I can tell you that Mr. Burrington asked to put up a fence. He didn't know that we should have a that we had a fence ordinance, so he had to come in after he started building his fence and get a permit, and he actually had to pay a fine or double the fee because he didn't realize that. Hopefully I'm not stealing any of your thunder here, Chris. And then it did come out in favor of the property owner. We did get some advice from our city attorney, and that's not in here. He is going to actually write a memo to us, the city attorney, explaining why he felt that the property owner was understanding the ordinance differently than actually staff was. So hopefully I didn't complicate it too much, but I thought I should just give you some background on that. And then, Chris, the information that you gave me did not end up in the packet here tonight, but
Would you like it for?
did you make copies for everybody? You did.
Isn't
That
that
would be
the one
great.
we have?
This is the actual ordinance, but
Oh, okay.
this is what Chris actually went through
Okay.
to justify what he went through it. So yeah, I do have it. I still have it.
Thank you.
I remember it. though. Oh, there's 2 pages. They're different.
So my name is Chris Burrington. I'm married to Peg Burrington, and we live at 614 South Main Street. And that's in Ward 5. It's a historic district. And our house has what we call a front yard that's on South Main Street and a rear yard, as we call it, on Washington Street. So the lot runs all the way through. And you're going to find that situation to be the same for many of the properties that are in that district. South of Lake Street, there's 8 properties down to South Park that are all in the same situation. On Washington Street, our property is 66 feet wide. We have a 2.5-story barn that's 34 feet wide and takes up over half of that lot width. This house was on the historic register. It was built by Edward and Rose Brown in 1894, and we've lived there approximately 21 years. As the mayor said, I started building a fence, and when I was about halfway done, my son came over to take a look at it, and he said, you know, it's really nice you're replacing your old wooden fence with this new vinyl fence, but you better check to see if you need a permit. So we had a fence on the property, had been there for 30 years or more, was falling down. We're basically just replacing it. The old fence was about 4.5 feet tall. The new fence is 5 feet tall. And in going in and checking, I was told, yes, you do need a permit. So I submitted the paperwork and the fees. And at the time of submission, I was told by the code enforcement officer, your plan does not meet the ordinance. You cannot connect to your garage, which is our barn. You have a front yard on Main Street and a front yard on Washington Street. Your property does not have a rear yard. And I was a little confused because I had read the ordinance cover to cover, and I thought I was in good shape. And I asked where this was written, and I was told it's not. That's the way we interpret it. So a number of emotions go through your head when you're told this after spending a substantial amount of money to put in a new fence. And I thought, you know, I really need to get grounded here. I could be in the wrong. Maybe I don't understand the ordinance. So I contacted 3 aldermen separately and had them come over to my property, or 2 did actually. 1 did not, but I contacted Alan Keelan, Dave Peterson, and Steve Hackett, and basically gave them a copy of the ordinance and asked them for their input. And Alan and Dave visited the property. Steve, we talked on the phone regarding the ordinance. I tried to ask 5 questions. Are you aware of the front yard interpretation for rear lots bordering Washington Street in Ward 5? And all of them answered no. Do you feel that it's fair to all residents in this area considering potential implications? And I'll get into that on the next page, but all answered no, and it seems like an extreme interpretation. Is this interpretation something that you have approved and support? All answered no to both, and one added that the ordinance was approved as written. So I guess what I was looking at was that written ordinance. The next question was, do you feel that the back of my lot is a front yard or a rear yard? And all answered, it's not a front yard. And then the last question was, is the fence that I have installed an eyesore or a detriment to the neighborhood or the city? And Dave and Alan, who had come over to the property, answered it is not. And if anything, it improves the appearance. And I'm not talking to Steve Hackett to see if he's driven by the property to take a look at it yet. But as I said, I asked for their advice, and they told me what I really needed to do next was come and talk to the mayor. So as I prepared for that meeting on August 27th, I tried to put all my thoughts together in this document. And really the main thing that came to mind was, is this interpretation in the best interest of my neighbors? So I'm thinking about everybody who has lots with what I would call the rear yard on Washington Street, front yard on South Main Street. So what I did was I took pictures down the street between South Park and Lake Street. So I live in that southern section of Washington. And I showed those pictures to Mayor Smith. And on the east side of the street, there's no sidewalks. What you see going down the street is only unattached garages, driveways, dumpsters, some stored boats. So I said, you know, if this front yard interpretation remains as is, not only would people not be able to put in fencing higher than 3 feet, because treating it as a front yard, if you read the ordinance, you can see in a front yard you can't have a fence over 3 feet tall. So for us, we have a 85-pound black lab, so it's really important that we keep that lab in our yard. The old fence would do that. It was 4.5 feet tall. We purchased something as close to that as we could purchase, and that is 5 feet tall. But the other really big thing was that if this is a front yard for a fence, then it's a front yard for an unattached garage as well. And the city doesn't allow unattached garages to be built in the front yard. So in the event of a lightning strike and/or fire, tornado, natural disaster, collapse from age, no unattached garage on that street could be rebuilt. So in my mind, you know, that really isn't fair to the people who live in that area. You know, if this type of information would get out to realtors and people in the community, you know, you can imagine what would happen to our property values. And I felt these were really serious implications. And I'm confident that none of my neighbors know about this. And if I were to have gotten them involved at that point, you know, I would be afraid as to how they would react to that. And I'm
Well,
sure
they do now.
and I'm sure that they wouldn't support it, you know.
Okay.
And it really denies rights to Main Street, Washington Street lots that other areas don't have. And when you think about this area, you've got a lot of older historic homes, and if you want to keep this area alive, you've got to be making property improvements. And as a former board member of the Waupaca Historical Society, this is really important to me. Waupaca history is important. And we would like to think that 25, 30 years from now when we're gone, that our house is going to live on. There's going to be a family living there, and it's going to continue to be an important part of the neighborhood. You know, when you consider that fewer and fewer people want to purchase these historic homes, you've got to be able to add value and sustainability, and this new vinyl fence does that for our property, plus it allows us to keep our dog in the yard. So with no rear yard, the way I looked at it, is anyone really going to want to buy these properties? And I would say not many. So in my mind, this wasn't fair to the residents. So with that, I think the mayor turned it over to the city attorney, correct? Or he was looking at it at that point in time. And for us, completing the fence is really important for the reasons I've stated, and that the 5-foot fence is well under the 6-foot maximum height that's required for a rear yard. So our goal was really to find an amicable solution that allows us to finish the fence and avoid controversy and undue publicity. And at some point, we'd really like to see a clearer ordinance with particularly this item addressed in the ordinance. I think with that, that's kind of where we left it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions of Chris before he?
I got one. The fence is not complete, you said?
No, I have the work permit now.
Okay.
I had completed, it's only in the rear yard, not in the front yard. So almost the entire property, 75% of the property was fenced with this historic fence. So
Okay.
this new vinyl fence is only in the rear.
What was their justification for not allowing it to be attached to the garage?
Well, I believe by their interpretation, you could not have a fence over 3 feet tall bordering Washington Street. They considered that a front yard. So therefore, anything bordering Washington Street would need to be 3 feet or less. And that's not going to keep our dog in.
So is the height, was there also an issue with the setback? With that being determined or defined as a front yard?
I don't believe so. Our old fence ran all the way up almost to Washington Street, and we have removed that. We are well back even with our garage now, and we are not on city frontage any longer.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you, Chris. So I think what I wanted to do here, and I'm not, I hope it doesn't look like I'm picking on city staff here, but because they're basing it on the information that they have, that the council passed as an ordinance back in, what was it, 2012? 09, okay, in 2009. And there are some examples in the packet, if you go to like the very last page, where it gives you not the exact example that Mr. Burrington is talking about, but it's similar. If you look at the very last example, you have a street that goes past the front of the house, and then you also have a street to the side. And by doing that, this states that they have 2 front yards, right? And so the interpretation that was made then is that if there's a street, that must make it a front yard. And again, it was, when Tom Hart took a look at it, and we have the email somewhere but we don't have his memo yet, but he felt that was not right, that this picture doesn't necessarily mean that the backyard, since it abuts a street, makes a front yard. And so, and I think that the biggest thing, number one, I can't imagine having 2 front yards, so that confused me big time, but.
On Brown Street, there are 2 residences that would have 3 front yards then,
Yeah.
okay? And I don't know about Tioga, but Brown Street for sure.
Same thing.
So there are properties within our city, obviously, that have a street in front of their house and a street behind them, and they also have a street to the side of them. And I think the side yard is probably just as much of an issue as the rear yard too, if you call that a front yard also. And I do have, as a matter of fact, I had somebody that called me over the weekend, and they're in that same situation over by Timber Drive, where they have they have a front yard, and then there's a road that goes to the side of their house, and they have a building that's on the side of their house, and it's being deemed as their front yard, so they're told they need to tear it down. And in my mind, it's a side yard, it's not a front yard. And I guess I just want to get your opinion. I mean, do we need to go through the whole ordinance? I'm not sure, but the examples are a little confusing to me, quite honestly, so I just thought it should be brought up.
And
One thing I would say right off the top, being the old English teacher, by definition, you can't have two front yards. You either have the front of the house, and that's great, and you have a yard, that's great, but everything else is not a front yard any longer. It's something, but you can't have two front yards.
we have certain properties in the city, not too many of them, I think mostly on the lakes, where they have what is called a flag lot. So the only frontage they have on a street is for a driveway to get to the property, which is behind another house. And the city has interpreted that as a front yard, even though it's on the water, and if you were to list it as a real estate person, you would call it frontage on the water. Okay, so the front yard is the water side, in my opinion. The backyard is the front yard, according to the city. And we've had a case where a person wanted to build a garage, a detached garage on that parcel. It would be called the front yard by the city, but it was not permitted because of the ordinance. And I think that's wrong. I think the ordinance needs changing from that perspective as well.
This is very typical in planning, having written a bunch of these. That's the interpretation through definition. And through interpretation is that, and I bet you, I don't have our book in front of me, but I bet your definition of a front yard is any yard with frontage against the public right of way.
That's correct.
Is that close? So therefore, you can have, by definition, two front yards, whether it be one in the front and one in the back. And I'm not saying we shouldn't take a look at it, but typically, from a planning standpoint, and through language and definition, that's how you read that and how you interpret it. The part about connecting to the garage, I don't see that anywhere in here. That's just, in my opinion, misinterpretation. You can't connect a fence to a garage. I would argue against that if I wanted to put a fence up for my dog, which I do. So I'll be interested in taking a better look at this. So, but unfortunately, and in development too, new developments have much wider corner lots to accommodate for a front yard and a front yard. And also what we refer to as double frontage lots, like you have with Washington and Maine, you account for a wider rear yard, which in this case, I don't have the lot setbacks memorized, but sometimes you can have some advantage. Sometimes rear yard setbacks are quite extensive. However, here I think it's, 3 feet. So that gives you an advantage to having a rear yard. You can do more stuff with your square footage. So,
John, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
How do you handle then, I mean, one of the biggest things first of all, I had a hard time with
Yeah.
having two front yards, and you've explained that well to me. But
So-
also,
yeah, so in the fencing section, you address those very specific instances of a corner lot with frontage on two public right-of-ways and double frontage lots with frontage on the front and rear of the property, where you can treat one as a rear yard. You need to address that in section 11. That's where I would go, rather than redefining the illustrations and the requirements set forth in the bulk requirements. I don't think you touch that, because that's a lot of work.
You're
So
saying make exceptions for those
make
few lots.
make provisions for the corner lot and a through lot. You or
can
a double
have
frontage lot.
multiple front lots, but one would be your primary front lot,
Or you'd have like a
Right.
secondary front lot.
And there
There's
are a
different
lot of
standards,
ordinances that are written that do address that in their fencing section, that the side of the house with the door, the front door is the front, and then it opens up the other portions of the property to development. So I could point you to a few ordinances where that is addressed, where they do have some definitions of, you have a corner lot, now what? Or you have a double frontage lot, now what? How do you treat that? And if it's written in place, I think in section 11 here for the, well, I'm sorry, that's the non-residential in section 10, pardon me, where fences, addressing fences placed on residential lands. That's where you'd want to address this instance of having double frontage or corner frontage, where you do have, by definition, more than one. So that you don't have restrictions in place that you never intended to have. I think that would be the way to address this quite simply.
So it could still be considered a front yard, but you would
Yeah.
have an exception to it, is
Right,
what
so
you're saying.
so what you don't want is on a corner lot, if you call, let's call 4th Street my side yard, well, my 4th Street neighbors aren't gonna be happy when my house is sticking out, 15 more feet than their home. So that's why that's in place. It's to protect people on 4th Street, 2nd Avenue. So that,
Right. Right,
one doesn't have accessory structures being built in it, but for fencing, that's the easy address, I think, that you can take care of some of the provisions within that section 10.
sure,
Accommodate fencing
sure.
in those
Okay.
conditions, yeah.
John, have you seen other exceptions other than fencing?
Not
For lots
really.
like
I mean, when you start talking about accessory buildings, that's where the neighborhood issues come into play, and adversely impacting others' values. Fence height, that's an easy addition. To make accommodations so people can close their yards properly for animals or for gardens or whatever they want to do in their yard. They shouldn't be limited to a 3-foot fence. For my dog would be fun for the dog, something to jump over, so it kind of restricts, right now how it's written kind of restricts how people can use their yards, and there's some easy provisions for height to make exceptions for corner and through lots that, yeah, without rewriting the whole
Yeah,
thing.
well, how do you address, and how do you address then when Mr. Burrington talked about his detached garage being in the front yard, and then if that building was to burn down, they would not be able to rebuild?
Yeah, that's something that, it's a pre-existing condition now, and it would be, what do we call that?
Grandfather.
Non-conforming.
Non-conforming.
Yeah. So, right now, they can keep it, it's grandfathered, and should something happen to it, then we refer back to the ordinance here. It's a double lot, so as you move, southeast down Washington, that gets narrower and narrower, so you get very limited, and some of those homes couldn't even be rebuilt, according to the ordinance that we have.
So you're saying that the ordinance is accurate in that if Mr. Burrington's garage was to burn down, or if he wanted to just tear it down and rebuild, he would not be allowed to? I'm sorry, I hate to ask you for legal,
Oh, no, I'm
Advice.
not providing legal advice,
yeah,
just
or your interpretation, yeah, I'm
my
sorry.
professional opinion without having the ordinance in front of me.
Yeah,
To the best of my knowledge, yeah, that's how it reads right now. Is that it couldn't build a non-conforming structure.
based on what you have read so
Correct.
far.
Correct.
Would it make any difference because it's in a historical district?
I don't think that gives carte blanche to move forward,
reconstruct it.
right. because
Only
it's
if we had
historic.
that specifically written out in our ordinance. This does
think
not
you'd have
apply to
to
historical
You
district.
build it in the right spot to the historic standards, is what I would think. So it'd be
So-
unfortunate to lose it.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess that's why I brought it here today, quite honestly, because my feeling is that they should be able to rebuild a detached garage in their backyard or their second front yard.
Yeah, and they could, it'd have to move back. It would have to not be in the same footprint as where it is now. But a detached and accessory structure could be built, because that's the only one on the property. They could replace it with,
But it can't be in the front yard.
correct, they'd have to slide it back, but they could rebuild it on their property.
But they have 2 front yards. Where would they build it?
Right, they can build it behind the setback.
Because
on
it
a
would-
front
yard.
because
No,
that
it's
would be
front
the
yard.
exception to the front.
Well, there's also a side yard. I mean, at some point, I could draw a good diagram and convince, it's not front yard all the way across because it's double frontage. Front yard consists of the area in front of the setback, the rest is the buildable area. And the area next to each lot line next to them is a side yard. And then there's a big rectangle in the middle called the buildable area. So they could be able to build that. You can't build in that front yard setback, is what it's referring to.
That's what okay. Okay.
Yeah. They didn't just get, just a front yard. There's the buildable area, side yards, 2 side yards on each side. Side lots those don't front on a right-of-way, and the front yard ends at the 25-foot setback. They need a buildable area.
Yeah, I don't, okay.
Yeah, that's the fun with ordinances.
Yeah,
Interpretation and definition. That's why it's so important. That it's being defined, and if there's ever questions, that the interpretation, you need a day to get an interpretation from Mr. Hart or anybody. It'd be wise to get that interpretation before
right.
interpreting it off the cuff.
Oh, jeez, sorry.
So it's difficult. That's
Well, I guess
that's the challenge with the written ordinances.
I guess I have, my first question is, does City Planning Commission want to change this to make sure that it allows for, a second front yard to be able to have a higher fence, is the first question. And then the second question, I think, would have to do with, if you do have a second front yard, would you be allowed to build a detached structure within that front yard? And I'm assuming that the city could write an ordinance that would allow that if they wanted to.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what the official interpretation is of this ordinance that we have before us, what the legal interpretation of that is at this point in time.
From an attorney.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I stand corrected. I mean, I'm from what I'm hearing from you, staff probably did interpret the ordinance
Their way.
properly.
Yeah, their way. Interpretation isn't concrete. It can take a personal twist to it, but if it needed a legal interpretation, that would be the next step. But I still don't get you can't connect to the garage piece. I don't
Yeah, I
know where
don't
that came
know.
from, but in terms of the heights and how they interpreted it, I would agree.
That they did
Yeah.
handle it. Okay. And then I guess my other question too is that, and maybe this doesn't need to be done in public, but I'm trying to figure out if somebody disagrees with the interpretation of the ordinance, what's their next step?
I'd defer to city policy on that. What is the next step?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
I don't
Aaron?
know either.
No.
The new
We can
city
get that
administrator,
answer.
I think, is-
Doesn't Aaron know that already?
We'll look into that. as
We will
the-
look into-
Yeah,
yeah.
very good. Yeah, yeah, so. yeah. So, I think there's some,
Well, is there some interest in changing the ordinance so that it so that it makes it a lot easier for this example, and there's many of these examples in to be better understandable.
Yeah, I think we could investigate it, looking at some other municipalities as example, and seeing, how those interpretations help property owners navigate some of these unique conditions, unique property conditions. I think that would be something we'd listen to and see if we could incorporate into our ordinance.
So
My
it's still,
opinion.
Yeah,
it begs the question of what the Barringtons are thinking in terms of where do they go from here?
Well, they did get an opinion from our city attorney that allowed them to do it.
Okay.
So, yeah. And so they are moving forward. They have a building permit and they're allowed to do that. We were, again, trying to get that memo for tonight, but we weren't able to.
now how does this fit in with the code rewrite that presumably is still ongoing? Is this something that we would want to tackle on a more immediate basis than the entire code rewrite?
Well, I think the answer to that is that if we wait until we do the code rewrite, then we should, anybody that the city feels is in violation, we probably should not pursue that until we do the rewrite.
But that could take a couple of years, I would think. I'd be inclined to try to do a rewrite or, by exception, if nothing else, in the present code.
Of just this ordinance.
Well, specifically about fencing and flag lots.
Sure. Sure. Well, Andrew, you've been.
I think that's something we could easily tackle and, bring back. Is that something you'd want to just do informational at the next meeting and then maybe act the meeting after that? But we could certainly bring, I know there's different ways to address it. One, through some exceptions. I agree. I think getting, I think we could do it through exceptions. You could also do, we could think about, some kind of historic, overlay district that, there may be you may want to look at it just blanket for all corner lots or double loaded lots, or maybe this is maybe this really is only an issue within the historic district. Not sure how widespread this issue is, but I know that is a way communities also address these kind of issues with in historic areas, which is oftentimes where you run into these complications, and it's really just, I think it's just a normal outcome when you're trying to codify something and create a rule that's going to apply for the whole entire community, and then you invariably run into these situations where it just doesn't make logical sense to the way it's written. So we could certainly take a look at some other communities, and if folks find anything on your own, you want to send it our way, we'll take a look at that as well, but could do that for next month.
Okay, that would be great. I do think, though, that it needs to be not just the historic district, because there are other properties within the city that this does affect,
Well, the one you mentioned up in
by Timber Drive.
Timber
yeah.
Drive, which is a relatively new development.
Right. Okay. Anything else on that? Thank you, Andrew. So you got some walking papers there too, so that's great. Thank you. Anything else for the meeting tonight?
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Keelan, second by Olson, that we adjourn the City Planning Commission meeting till our next meeting, subject to call. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. We're adjourned at 6:43 PM.